this meeting of the Saugeen Shores Committee of Adjustment. We have all members in attendance. And so I'll call the meeting to order at 4:30. And I will read the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which consists of the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation. We understand this land holds immense significance to the people of Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. We appreciate those who live and work alongside us today and who continue the traditions of their ancestors as stewards of the land we are privileged to inhabit. We thank them for the contributions they have made in both caring for the land and in shaping this community. We commit to truth and reconciliation, to acknowledging the truth about what happened to Indigenous peoples because of colonization, and to reconciliation, which begins with each and every one of us. As a local government and public organization, we are dedicated to learning about Indigenous culture, to fostering a better relationship with First Nations and their people, and we commit ourselves to actions that move us forward on a path to healing along with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. Next on the agenda is an acknowledgement of any pecuniary interest. You're able to declare now or at any point in the meeting, but does anyone have a pecuniary interest to declare? Seeing none, we'll move on to the adoption of the minutes. You would have received in your packages minutes from the November 21st, 2022 meeting. And I'd ask for a mover and a seconder.
So
Mike Myatt's mover and a seconder. If you could just show with your hand up. Mike Martin. We have two MMs. This is going to be fun. Mike Myatt for the moving and Michael Martin for the seconding. Are there any comments about the minutes? All those in favor? And again, just show your hand. The minutes are passed. Or carried. Okay, we have 4 public hearings tonight. And as I come up to speed on sharing these meetings, I'm not sure who else is on the Zoom call, so I'll expect a little bit of advice and assistance as we go. But next on the agenda is a public meeting for file number, minor variance application file number A-2022-049 by Christine Mitchell and William Timmermans. The address in question is 491 Gustavus Street. This is a public meeting being held under the Planning Act. First, we will receive a report from the planning staff, then committee members will have an opportunity to ask any questions that they might have of a technical nature. And I will ask them then to reserve their comments on the application until after we've heard from the public. So again, after the report is read, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions of a technical nature. And then after that, we'll hear from the public. And then following that, the committee will be able to then discuss the application. Comments may be made in person as part of the public meeting or in writing submitted to the planning staff. This is from the public. After we've heard from the public, the committee will discuss and consider a recommendation on this application. Please note that the Planning Act limits appeals of Committee of Adjustment applications to the Ontario Land Tribunal to the applicant, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, public bodies, and specified persons which are mostly related to utility companies. I now declare the public meeting open for this file, and I'll ask the planner on the file to present the application and their report.
Good afternoon. I'm just going to share my screen. Can everybody see that?
I think it's good.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'll be presenting application A-2022-049. The address is 491 Gustavus Street in Port Elgin. So the purpose of this minor variance application is to reduce the interior yard setback for an accessory structure. Whereas the bylaw requires a setback of 1.2 meters, the applicant is proposing a interior side yard setback of 0.61 meters. and approval of this minor variance would facilitate the construction of a new garage. So this is the proposed site plan. There is currently a garage on the property, which you can see, and this is proposed to be demolished and replaced with a new garage. The existing side yard setback for this garage is currently at 0.77 meters, which is less than the required 1.2 meters. And so the applicant would slightly reduce the setback to 0.61 meters in order to provide a new garage that can fit 2 vehicles. These are just some photos of the site, and currently with the existing 1-car garage. So the land use policies for this property, the provincial policy statement recognizes it as a settlement area. The Bruce County official plan designates this property as a primary urban community. The Saugeen Shores official plan designates this property as residential, and the zoning on this property is residential residential first density 3. So the Planning Act requires that a minor variance meet 4 criteria in order to be considered for approval. So the first criteria asks, does the variance maintain the intent and purpose of the official plan? The subject property is currently designated primary urban communities in the Bruce County official plan and residential in the Saugeen Shores official plan. Both of these designations permit the property to be used as a low-density residential, with an accessory structure. The proposed garage is a permitted use and will continue to maintain the residential character of the lot. The proposal is therefore consistent with the land use policies for primary urban communities and residential designations. The second criteria asks, does the variance maintain? Yeah.
Your microphone is a little bit garbled, so I don't know if there's anything you
Sorry.
can do it to help. Thank you.
It's a bit old, so is that better if I hold it out? So the second criteria asks, does the variance maintain the intent of the zoning bylaw? The property is zoned residential first density, which permits single detached dwellings and accessory structures. The zoning bylaw outlines several provisions in section 7.3 for the R1 zone to maintain orderly development. The proposal conforms to the R1 zone requirements. However, it does not meet the minimum yard requirements for an accessory structure, which requires a minimum interior side yard setback of 1.2 meters. And so the purpose of having an interior side yard setback is to maintain orderly development. And the 0.61 meter setback proposed is not an exceptional difference from the current 0.77 meter setback, and will allow the owners to have a covered parking for 2 vehicles. So in addition to accessory provisions, there are parking requirements for single detached dwellings. And so for single detached dwellings, you have to have a minimum of 2 parking spaces, and each parking space is to be a minimum width of 2.75 meters each. So the total width of having 2 parking spaces side by side is a minimum of 5.5 meters. And so the proposed width of the garage is 6.4 meters, and that complies with the parking requirements. The bylaw also outlines requirements for yard encroachments, which allows for architectural elements such as eaves to project into any yard up to 0.6 meters when the yard setback is maintained at 1 meter. So in this case, the proposed side yard setback is less than 1 meter, and it is possible that architectural elements such as eaves may project into the interior side yard setback. Therefore, to ensure no architectural elements exceed the yard setback, a condition has been included, and this condition requires that no architectural elements project more than 0.61 meters into the setback. So it will be the encroachment will be maintained at the same distance as the setback that they are proposing, and the proposed variance in this case will maintain the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. And so the third criteria asks, Is the application desirable for the appropriate development of the land? The application is compatible with the residential nature of the property and surrounding area. The function of lands as residential will be maintained. And the fourth and final criteria asks, is the application minor? It is not expected that this variance will have a significant impact on the character of the area or impact the ability of adjacent property owners to use their property for their permitted residential uses. While the garage will encroach into the interior side yard setback, the adjacent property owner also has a garage that is right beside the applicant's garage. And it's not expected that the new garage would impede on the adjacent property owner's use of their property. And therefore the variance is considered to be minor. In terms of agency and public comments, no objections were received. However, the town requested that encroachments into a setback be considered as part of this application. And so in order to address yard encroachments, a condition has been added, which I just spoke about on the decision sheet, which provides that the maximum yard encroachment be 0.6 meters in order to ensure any projection of the garage is within the proposed setback area. So in summary, the applicant is proposing to reduce the side yard setback for an accessory structure. And given that the application meets the criteria of a minor variance, staff are recommending approval of application A49/2022. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jillian. I hope everyone was able to pick up most of that. It was a little bit garbled, Jillian.
Sorry.
That's okay. So I don't know, is anyone from the public here? I'm not too sure who I'm supposed to ask that. Jay, Morgan, anybody? Okay, we'll assume then that there are no.
Nope. I will. Fumbling with the wrong buttons. The applicants are attending, both Ms. Mitchell and Mr. Timmermans.
Okay, well, first of all, does any member of the committee have any questions of a technical nature to present to the planner? Seeing none, then would either of the applicants wish to speak?
Nope, I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, then we'll close the public part of this particular application, and if there's any committee discussion, this is the period. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and just wanted to ask of the applicant, I suppose, if I might do that. In the drive-by, I noticed that there is a pretty thick hedge, and it's in our package this evening. Will that thick hedge remain? And secondly, in behind is a privet hedge beside the existing garage, between right on the property line, I would think. And will that privet hedge remain as well? Those were my I did the drive-by, and just wondering about the landscape, how much will remain once that garage is removed and the new garage put up. So.
Okay, well, and if you could, Christine, if you could state your full name.
Christine Mitchell.
Thank you.
And our goals is we love that hedge, and our goals are to keep as much of that hedge as we possibly can. We do trim the hedge on a regular basis, so that it doesn't get too thick or too high. But the hedge will remain even as the garage goes up. So as much of the hedge as we could possibly save. As the garage comes slightly forward into the property, we will definitely maintain that landscaping or replace such a hedge.
Christine, what about the hedge behind? I see the front one's going to remain. That's nice.
There's some privacy. We've got a chain link fence around the back of our property, and there are some hedges against that chain link fence. Again, for privacy, we will maintain any hedge that we remove, we'll replace. But we will be keeping all those privacy hedges that are currently there, as well as our large trees in the backyard.
Thank you. That's nice to know. And have there been any concerns to the planner? Any concerns raised by the neighboring resident?
No, we have not received any comments from any neighboring neighbors.
Okay, I'll be supporting this application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, I've been asked to specifically check to see if any of the other people who have joined the Zoom, if they are here specifically for this application, if they're neighbors or people who are witnesses to this particular application. But I can't see any of those people, so someone else has to.
No, my husband and I just wanted to join to make sure we were answering all of your questions.
Yep, we can see you.
And to confirm, there are no other individuals on the line asking to speak to this file.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from members of the committee?
Just a quick question regarding the drawings. It looks like the garage is going over an existing tree, but I don't think I'm new to this. There isn't any ruling on replacing trees that come down on residential properties, correct?
We'll present that question to Jillian.
No, I don't believe so.
Great.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, then a question for Jillian. Are there any written submissions that were presented related to this application that have not been conveyed so far?
No, there were no comments received, written or otherwise.
Okay, I will now declare the public meeting to be closed. And I guess I've already done that, sorry. And we've had our comments. We will now consider a recommendation on the application. We did receive in the package two possibilities. So I'll just ask for a mover and a seconder of either granting or deferring or otherwise looking at the application. So the recommendation is to grant the minor variance. So if we could look at that one first, if there's a mover and a seconder for granting it. Okay, that's Rachel Stack moving it and Richard Beckett seconding it. Are there any other questions to the application? Then I'll take the vote. All those in favor of granting this application? Any objections? The application is carried. So the application for minor variance, oh, my computer just went off someplace here. The application for minor variance from comprehensive zoning bylaw 75-2006 is hereby granted, subject to the following conditions: that any future development on the property conforms to the provisions of the zoning bylaw, that the minimum interior side yard setback be 0.61 meters, that the maximum side yard encroachment be 0.6 meters. And number 4, that the decision applies only to the proposed development as indicated on Schedule A attached and forming part of this decision. So, and Jay will just let me know that we've done all of the relevant aspects.
So far, so good. It's good to
Thank you.
get the formalities correct, so it'll be more natural another time.
Okay, and moving on. Catch up here. What page is that? Okay, we're having
Let's talk it out if you'd like, Madam Chair.
okay, I'm gonna ask you for some printed copies so that the actual agenda is here in print form too.
Okay.
Next on the agenda is a public meeting for file number A-2022-061. The applicant is Michael Warning and Cynthia Snyder. The address is 339 Normanton Street in Port Elgin. And first we will receive a report from the planner.
Madam Chair, if I might, there are 3 variances before us that are of similar nature. Is now an appropriate time to discuss if they're considered as one, or would that come at a later point?
It is not something that we will do because our procedural bylaw would not enable us to do that right at the moment. There will be some review of the procedural bylaw. And for the purposes of making sure that we do all of the required steps until we're perhaps a little bit more just natural with the flow, we want to make sure that we cover all of the areas appropriately. So
Thank you.
they will be read separately today, but it's a good point that you bring up. So again, this application is by Michael Warning and Cynthia Snyder for 339 Normanton Street in Port Elgin, and I'll ask the planner for her report.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen again. Hopefully my audio is better. Again, apologies for that. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. So this is application A 2022-061 for 339 Normanton Street in Port Elgin. The applicant has applied to vary the parking requirements for a residential property. The application is seeking to increase the driveway width from 7.5 meters to 8.46 meters. The property is in residential use and is developed with a single detached dwelling with a basement apartment for a total of 2 dwelling units. The proposed driveway width that they are proposing is to accommodate an additional parking for the basement apartment in order to provide adequate off-street parking for this property. This is the site plan for the driveway. As you can see, the area that they would like to expand into is sort of highlighted in yellow, with the existing driveway highlighted in gray. And again, this is to increase the driveway to 8.46 meters. This is a photo of the existing property with the driveway right now. The land use policies for this property. So provincially, it is a settlement area. The Bruce County official plan designates it as a primary urban community. The Saugeen Shores official plan designates it as residential, and the zoning on the property is residential second density 5. So the Planning Act requires that a minor variance meet 4 criteria. The first criteria is, does the variance maintain the intent of the official plans? The property is designated primary urban communities in the county official plan and residential in the Saugeen Shores official plan. Both these designations permit detached dwellings as well as accessory residential uses. The official plans also direct that primary urban communities are to accommodate the majority of growth for the county, and residential areas are to provide for a range and mix of housing types. And so given the consideration of the application, the proposed variance will maintain the intent and purpose of the official plan by increasing the housing supply. The second criteria asks, does the variance maintain the intent of the zoning bylaw? The property is zoned residential second density, which permits detached dwellings and secondary dwelling units. Detached dwellings are required to have 2 parking spaces, and accessory dwellings are required to have 1 parking space. So therefore, this property is supposed to have 3 parking spaces to accommodate both dwellings. The bylaw provides that parking is not to be stacked for a dwelling unit and must be side by side. So each of the parking spaces is required to be a minimum of 2.75 meters in width. And therefore, in this case, to accommodate 3 parking spaces, the driveway would have to be a minimum of 8.25 meters to accommodate 3 vehicles. So given that the proposal is providing adequate off-street parking that complies with the parking space requirements and the land use permissions, the variance maintains the intent of the zoning bylaw. The third criteria asks, is the application desirable for the appropriate development of the land? The policies of the official plans and provisions of the zoning bylaw promote a variety of residential forms and permit detached dwellings with accessory residential units. As such, the proposed development will be compatible and support the land use objectives for the property. There are two other applications that have been received in this neighborhood with similar proposals to increase the driveway width. So this is not uncommon and does not introduce a new form into the neighborhood. So if approved, the driveway width for the variance would be consistent for all three of them. The variances would represent an appropriate form of development for the use of the land. The fourth criteria asks, is the application minor? And it is not anticipated that approval of this minor variance will impact the ability of adjacent property owners to use their property in accordance with the permitted uses of the zoning bylaw. The proposed use of the lands is permitted and it is compatible with the existing and surrounding uses. Therefore, variance is minor. So there have been no objection letters received for this application. In summary, the proposal is to increase the driveway width in order to provide sufficient off-street parking for the residential use of the property. The proposal meets the four criteria for a minor variance under the Planning Act, and no objections have been received. Therefore, planning staff are recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. I'm just going to backtrack for a second and read that the recommendation is subject to a review of submissions arising from the public meeting that the committee approved minor variance A-2022-061 warning has attached subject to the conditions on the decision sheet. And this is a public meeting being held under the Planning Act. Is the applicant in attendance at the Zoom meeting?
Yep, I'm here.
Are you interested or would you like to speak or?
No, I think everything makes sense. I'm good. I just wanted to make sure everything was covered.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Jay?
Yes, I just wanted to note we also have the builder with us online as well, Steve.
Okay. The applicant has indicated they're not interested in speaking, so.
Fair enough.
Okay, are there any comments or questions from the committee? Chad?
I'm uncertain if the question should go through you, Deputy Mayor Hooper, but I think it's not in our package, but I think one of the pictures that the planner showed included a fire hydrant. And are there any considerations specific to that this committee should be considering?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to direct that to Jay.
In our circulation, it didn't come up. I don't think there's any issue related to that for the specific requests that are identified for the driveway width.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, when I take a look at the four tests for minor variance, I mean, this is 1 meter, increasing driveway width to accommodate the extra car. And, I know this in the official plan. I know that in zoning bylaw, like the council's been really supportive of secondary dwelling suites. And we're a shortage of rental accommodation in this community. And I think this is great, to Steve, the builder, and to the applicant. Good for you, I say. I'll be supporting this application. I think it's minor in nature, and bring on the rental unit. Secondary dwelling suites are very important to this community. So I do, as a member of the Committee of Adjustment, I will be supporting it. And again, it's minor in my view. And thank you for bringing it forth.
Would any other members of the committee wish to speak? Okay, then we do have a recommendation to approve the minor variance. I would need a mover and a seconder.
Also move.
Chad's moving it and Michael Martin seconding. Any further discussion? All those in favor? It passes. So the application for minor variance from comprehensive zoning bylaw 75-2006 is hereby granted subject to the following conditions. 1, that any future development on the property conforms to the provisions of the zoning bylaw. 2, that the maximum driveway width for the front yard be 8.46 meters. And 3, that the decision applies only to the proposed development as indicated on Schedule A attached to and forming part of this decision. Thank you very much, Michael, for attending. Okay, next on the agenda is a public meeting for file number minor variance A-2022-062, and the name on the file is Devono, I believe. And this is a public meeting being held under the Planning Act. And the recommendation that we're receiving is subject to a review of submissions arising from the public meeting that the committee approved minor variance A-2022-062 Devono has attached subject to the conditions on the decision sheet. We'll now ask the planner for her report.
Thank you. I will share my screen again. And because this application is very similar to the other one, I'm going to just go through this briefly. So this is for application A 2022-62 for 344 Normanton Street in Port Elgin. The applicant has applied to vary the parking requirements for a residential property, and the application is seeking to increase the driveway width from 7.5 meters to 9.5 meters. Again, this is to accommodate another residential unit in the basement. This is a site plan, and that area in yellow that you see will be the area that is where the driveway will be expanding to, and that will be 9.5 meters. And I'm just going to go through some photos of the site. Again, the land use policies, provincially, it's a settlement area. The Bruce County official plan, it is a primary urban community. In the Saugeen Shores official plan, it is designated residential, and the zoning for it is residential second density 5. It does meet all 4 tests of a minor variance. I don't think I need to go through this again. And there were no agency or public comments received that objected to this application. So in summary, the proposal is to increase the driveway width from 7.5 meters to 9.5 meters in order to provide parking for the accessory dwelling unit. There were no objections received, and because this application meets the 4 tests of a minor variance, staff are recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Is the applicant at the meeting?
Yes, I think Steve's on the line. He was a builder as well. He's here for this and the next file, but he
Okay.
may or may not wish to speak.
Would the applicant like to speak? Assuming they don't. We'll open it up to the committee now. Are there any comments or questions from members of the committee? Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And question, 2 questions and comment. One to Steve and one to Jay. Steve, the last application was 7.5 meters to 8.46, so less than 1 meter, and this one's 2 meters. I'm just kind of curious. Why the extra 1 meter? That's to Steve, I suppose.
Yeah. I don't see Steve on my
Oh, he's not on.
screen, but are we able to?
I'm not sure. There could be a technical issue.
He might
Not
not.
aware.
Jay, do you know, I mean, it's, to me, it's still minor in nature, but extra parking spot, again, a secondary dwelling suite, good for the resident, good for the builder. We need these units in town, but what, any idea why this is different by extra 1 meter?
Well, I think the drawing on slide, well, it's like the 3rd slide in this package is pretty informative. There's a design imperative maybe to decrease the number of bumps in the driveway and sort of align the width of the driveway with the doors of the garages.
Right.
So if
Just
that's
be-
one reason, I don't want to
Design.
put words in the applicant's
No,
mouth.
it's okay, a design feature more than anything, so. And that's fine, anyways, again, I'll be supporting this. Is very similar to the last application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other comments or questions? Nancy, go ahead.
Yes, when I'm looking at that site plan image, it looks like the yellow area is just a front corner. Currently, the driveway from the image below extends across the extent of the garages. So is it the area that's going to be infilled that aligns it right up to the front steps to make that width increase? It doesn't appear in the images that there is that curvature in the driveway that's shown in the site plan.
If I may, Madam Chair, I'll direct that to planner Ms. Smith.
Yes, we'll ask the planner for a comment. Jillian? Well, thank you, Jay.
Yes, sir. The other photos in the presentation indicate the driveway width has already been established. So the width that is at the 9 meters plus has already been built, installed. So the driveway width is uniform with the width of the garages. So I think the drawing was intended to show the proposed that would be compliant. And then when it was inspected, it was shown to be non-compliant. And this is what the nature of the variance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Are there any other comments or questions? Chad, go ahead.
Or Jay, you lost me there. So I'm on the site plan where the highlight is, and I'm looking at the image below that Nancy referenced. So now is the proposal to go over to where it comes out from the front steps and bring that forward to the road? Is that your understanding?
My understanding is the proposal is to approve the constructed as is. So it's installed at 9.5 meters.
Okay.
So the site plan is showing what would have been a compliant site plan versus what is actually constructed.
Anything further, Chad?
No, as long as it's to approve it as is, I would support it, yes.
Any other comments from members of the committee?
If I may, a question about construction before compliance, again, new to this committee. Would it have gone ahead because it was understood that we're looking for secondary dwellings, and so driveways are being expanded?
I'm going to ask Jay Posner from the town staff to comment on that.
If I may, I certainly we don't encourage people to just go ahead and build non-compliant features or buildings. Certainly the expectation is that if they seek a building permit and seek approval from the town, that they comply with the bylaw. So that they install the driveway, I'm not sure what to say, but the request, as we put to all applicants, is if it's a non-compliant, you can either comply, in other words, remove the issue and make it comply, or take your chances with the committee and develop a planning case about why it's an appropriate request. And so in the information in front of you, you've got the planner going through the full exercise and analysis and is recommending approval.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
Thank you. Through you to Jay. Jay, I suspect in the province of Ontario have been pretty vocal about rental units and secondary dwelling suites. We as a municipality have changed our requirements for secondary dwelling suites. They're being fairly aggressive in that area. I expect we're going to see more of these with driveway widths being adjusted in minor variance position. Do you see that, Jay, with potentially a lot more of these happening in the future? Like, it's fairly new in the last year dwelling suites for Saugeen Shores. You see that these will continue to flow through committee of adjustments, or is there any way of us changing zoning bylaws that would permit, rather than have them come back here for 1 meter, 1 meter, 1 meter, another 20, 30, 40, 50 times? Can we plan such pass me policy that would regulate this, Jay, or not?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it certainly is. We monitor these sorts of files for the frequency they come up with, and if there's an opportunity to update bylaws so that this, if it is something of a feature that we want to build into our bylaw, we can consider it. Council can consider it, so it will be something we monitor.
I just think we should keep an eye on it, Madam Chair. Like if these come back, there's 3 tonight, and the 3 next meeting, or 3 the next, and we're approving one meter minor variances to get an extra parking spot, which we encourage. We want people to put in secondary dwelling suite. Just something to keep in mind for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Chad?
My last comment, I hope, but I would assume the bylaws were developed to maintain some green space in Saugeen Shores, and I concur with what my colleagues have said about the absolute need for additional housing and additional affordable housing. I do wonder, with these minor variances, is there a situation, I hope that we're not approving variances for the potential that these might be used for additional income generating residences, and not just for the sake of having an enlarged driveway. So I don't know if there's a way to consider that in future applications or not, but it is a hope and a desire of mine that these would be used for the purpose of which this committee is approving them.
Well, the point of the minor variance is to have the driveway space, the parking space apply to the potential for an R1 building, which now has a secondary unit in the basement, but the secondary unit requires a parking space. The R1 unit requires 2 parking spaces, so you need that number 3 in there. So your point is well taken. However, now that the town has secondary units possible and additional residential units, even beyond just 1 additional unit, there's all kinds of new questions related to parking and where that parking goes and how much needs to be provided. So I think we'll probably see some other applications over the next year that very specifically pick up on additional residential units within an R1 zone. Is that fair, Jay?
Well, I appreciate the discussion, and is one thing that we were conscious of when we approved, or when we brought forward the additional residential unit bylaw to council a half year ago, was that we would need to monitor the sort of uptake on these files so that we can understand what the issues might be, both in terms of what you're seeing tonight, but also from applicants themselves, if they're discouraged or otherwise something is unforeseen is impeding them from getting a building permit. So we want to monitor that and may bring forward changes to council, and that maybe it might not be too long a wait. I do want to emphasize, though, if I may, that what Member Zimmerman said is it is also a reason to ensure that the driveway width is optimized. I'll use that term as opposed to minimized or maximized, but optimized. So we do not have a continual concrete jungle, essentially. So there needs to, and this is again why you're charged with making these decisions, is that are you balancing the need to maintain a particular streetscape with the need and ability and the capacity to install and meet other planning objectives. So we appreciate the discussion and debate.
Thank you, Jay. Sure.
Just one more comment, just relating to that, Jay. The landscape is important, and the concrete jungle comment you made. I'm making the assumption that trees have not been removed because it was already constructed, non-conforming, and now they're coming back for the minor variance. But in the future, Jay, just with landscape, I think we can make it a requirement, can we, or not, with a minor variance application that, yeah, you're going to get your 1 or 2 extra meters, but we want an extra 1 or 2 trees put in your front yard on the green space. Is that something that we as a committee can, I'm not saying tonight we do that, but I'm saying in the future, You know, certainly we don't want trees removed to get an extra meter without being replaced. Can we make that as a condition of approval for future applications?
Yeah, certainly. I also just to remind, I know you acknowledged that maybe not for tonight yet, and so I recommend not straying too far from the specific merits and the analysis provided by the planner. But as we've been trained, we're trying to develop conditions that are enforceable, that are related, that they're tied to the decision. So maybe we can think about that in other terms, but perhaps not at this.
But for future applications, you
Potentially,
could
yeah.
make it a condition of approval that 1 or 2 trees are planted on their front lawn, so it doesn't become a concrete jungle.
Right. I just will leave it as a potential, and we'll examine
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jillian, did you hear the question that was presented to you before?
No, sorry, my audio cut out. I guess I'm having issues. Sorry, what was it?
I think the question came from you, Nancy. Could you repeat it?
Sure, it was with respect to the drawing that shows the site plan with the front corner being yellow and indicating that that is the adjustment that is being made, but that in fact the driveway, it has been pointed out, has been constructed to 9.5 meters. I had been asking whether or not the driveway was going to be widened to be in alignment with the front steps coming straight out. And then a question about that I believe Jay has answered about building outside of compliance. And that the answer there was that it's not recommended, but at this point, they've brought it forward for approval. And if it was denied, obviously it would have to be rectified. But so it was a question about compliance, I guess. Thanks.
Okay. Did Jay answer your question?
You did, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Okay, we do have a recommendation that the application for a minor variance is granted, subject to some conditions. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Rachel moved it, Rachel Stack, Councillor Stack, and seconded by Nancy Darlington Smith. And all those in favor? So that the the application is granted. The application for minor variance from comprehensive zoning bylaw 75-2006 is hereby granted, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, that any future development on the property conforms to the provisions of the zoning bylaw. Number 2, that the maximum driveway width for the front yard be 9.5 meters. And number 3, that the decision applies only to the proposed development as indicated on Schedule A attached to and forming part of this decision. Do I need to read the reasons, Jay? Okay. We have one more application. Let me just catch up here. Next on the agenda is a public meeting for file number minor variance A-2022-064 Haddock. This is a public meeting being held under the Planning Act, and I will ask the planner to make her report.
Thank you. I'm just going to pull the presentation up. So again, this is for application A 2022-064 for 312 Normanton Street in Port Elgin. The application is to vary the parking requirements for the residential property. The application is seeking to increase the driveway width from 7.5 meters to 9.3 meters in order to accommodate another vehicle for the accessory basement apartment. This is the site plan. Again, you can see the area that they want to expand is yellow, and it's for 9.3 meters. These are some photos of the site. the land use policies. So it is a provincial area recognized by the province. It is designated primary urban community in the Bruce County official plan, designated residential in the Saugeen Shores official plan, and zoned residential second density in the zoning bylaw. The application does meet all 4 tests of a minor variance, as discussed earlier. And there were no objection letters received for this application. So this is a minor variance to increase the driveway width from 7.5 meters to 9.3 meters in order to provide parking for the accessory dwelling unit. Because this application meets the 4 tests of a minor variance, and there were no objections received, staff are recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Is the applicant in attendance? The applicant is not in attendance. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Okay, any member of the committee have a question or comment pertaining to this application?
Excuse me.
Well, seeing none, we have a recommendation from the planner that this application for a minor variance be granted. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Stack, seconded by Member Zimmerman. All those in favor? Are there any further questions? Sorry, all those in favor? Motion carries. So the application for minor variance from comprehensive zoning bylaw 75-2006 is hereby granted, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, that any future development on the property conforms to the provisions of the zoning bylaw. Number 2, that the maximum driveway width for the front yard be 9.3 meters. And number 3, that the decision applies only to the proposed development as indicated on Schedule A attached to and forming part of this decision. And that brings us to the end of our public hearings agenda. Our next meeting date is mentioned as being January the 16th, 2022, which will be confirmed dependent upon the need for a meeting. Are there any other issues or comments from members of the committee? Then seeing that it is 5:21, I'll ask for a motion of adjournment. Moved by Member Beckett and seconded by Member Martin. All those in favor? Meeting is adjourned.
Very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you.